They founded the first Slavic state in Europe. Even the mighty Byzantine Empire used to pay them tribute. On their land, archaeologists discovered the oldest gold jewelry on the planet, older than the Egyptian pyramids by 2000 years. They invented Cyrillic. Without them, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Serbia and several other Slavic countries wouldn't even have an alphabet. And it's not just Slavic countries. Cyrillic, created by Bulgarians, is still used today in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Mongolia. And let's not forget, they also invented yogurt. Yes, these little bottles you see on store shelves all over the world. So why, despite such an incredible and rich history, is Bulgaria the poorest country in the entire European Union today? Welcome to Slavic, and today we'll dive deeper into the story of this fascinating country, Bulgaria. If you leave a like while watching, it really helps support the channel. And if you don't enjoy the video, you can always take the like back. Bulgaria is one of the oldest countries in Europe, with a rich and dramatic history. Its lands have seen mighty kingdoms, bloody wars, and long periods of both greatness and decline. We won't go too deep into ancient times. Let's start with the First Bulgarian Empire, which began at the end of the 7th century. Just 100 years later came the country's golden age, when Simeon the Great turned Bulgaria into one of the most powerful states in Europe. Bulgarians were in constant conflict with the Byzantine Empire and even besieged Constantinople 3 times. These two Christian centers were fighting for dominance over the Balkan Peninsula, an area critical for trade routes linking Asia and Europe. There were also cultural clashes. While Byzantium tried to spread the Greek language and religious traditions, Bulgaria was developing Slavic writing system and the Slavic language. It was during the First Bulgarian Empire that a unique culture emerged, one that later became the foundation of the entire Slavic world. Missionaries from Bulgaria brought Slavic writing and Orthodox Christianity to Kievan Rus, Serbia and Croatia. When Prince Vladimir baptized Rus in Kiev in 988, the church services were conducted in a language created in Bulgaria. You could say that Bulgaria, in a way, saved Slavic culture from being assimilated by Byzantium and the Latin West. Without Bulgaria's achievements, there would be no Russian or Serbian writing in its modern form. However, after the death of Simeon the Great in 927, the central power of the Bulgarian Empire began to decline. His successors failed to hold on to their conquests, and by the mid-10th century, Serbia and Croatia broke away from the center. Internal rebellions began. Western Bulgarian princes effectively created a separate state in Macedonia. The situation worsened with constant wars against Byzantium, and eventually Bulgaria fell completely. At the beginning of the 11th century, the First Bulgarian Empire ceased to exist. Byzantium abolished the Bulgarian Patriarchate, introduced the Greek language into the churches, and installed Greek priests in Bulgarian parishes. On top of that, Byzantium imposed heavy taxes on the Bulgarian population, which constantly impoverished the locals. Nevertheless, the Bulgarians lived under Byzantine rule for almost 170 years, until by the end of the 12th century, the people's patience finally ran out. In 1185, the Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelus demanded a tribute of blood from the Bulgarians. He needed recruits for his war against the Normans. This became the last straw. The brothers Asen and Peter gathered the people at the church of Saint Demetrius. "God sees our humiliation," shouted Asen, pointing at the Byzantine banners above the fortress. "They take our daughters. They seize our last piece of bread. But today we say enough." The Bulgarians rose up in rebellion, declared independence, and made the city of Trnava, the center of the uprising, their new capital. The Byzantine Empire responded with a punitive campaign, but the Bulgarians, hiding in the Balkan mountains, defeated the Byzantines in the narrow mountain passes. After a series of battles in its attempts to bring the rebellious Bulgarians back under control, Byzantium was eventually forced to recognize Bulgaria's independence. Thus, in 1187, the Second Bulgarian Empire was born, which would last for more than 200 years. The first half of the 13th century became the peak of Bulgarian power. Tsar Ivan Asen II defeated the Despotate of Epirus, doubling Bulgaria's territory, stretching from the Danube River to the Aegean Sea. During his rule, most of the Balkan Peninsula was controlled by the Bulgarian Empire. In the Second Bulgarian Empire, the cultural traditions of the First Empire continued to develop. This period saw the rise of Bulgarian schools of painting. The literature of the Second Empire, which reached its greatest heights in the mid and late 14th century, developed mainly as religious texts translated from Greek. A reform of the Bulgarian literary language was carried out, and translations from Greek became closer to the original works of Cyril and Methodius. This reform strongly influenced writing in Serbia and throughout Rus, including the lands of Ukraine and Belarus. Unlike the fortresses of the First Empire, the new fortresses were built on high hills protected by cliffs and rivers. They consisted of stone walls that followed the natural landscape. Cities of this period were made up of the fortress itself and residential buildings constructed at its base. This was the layout of the capital Trnava and many other Bulgarian cities. For its time, the Second Bulgarian Empire was a highly advanced state. However, after the death of Ivan Asen II, the country was ruled for a long time by weak leaders. As a result, Bulgaria lost its influence on the Balkan Peninsula. In 1242, the Bulgarian Empire was invaded by the Mongols and was forced to pay tribute to the Golden Horde. After that, the country plunged into over 50 years of internal wars, during which 8 rulers replaced one another. Under pressure from its neighbors, Bulgaria gradually lost territory. Byzantium regained Macedonia and northern Thrace, while Hungary seized control of Belgrade from the Bulgarians. The Second Bulgarian Empire was slowly losing strength, and in the 14th century, Bulgaria faced a new and dangerous threat: the Ottoman Turks. They began launching devastating raids across the Balkan Peninsula. Attempts by the Bulgarians to form an alliance for a joint struggle against the Turks ended in failure. The Ottoman conquest of the Second Bulgarian Empire began gradually, and by the end of the 14th century, the empire ceased to exist, falling into complete vassal dependence on the Ottoman Empire. For almost 5 centuries, the Bulgarians lost their independence. Despite this, the people fought to preserve their identity, their faith, and their culture. The Ottomans forbade the construction of new churches, but Bulgarians hid icons and the relics of their saints in caves and built churches carved directly into the rocks. Monks secretly copied books, and religious services were held only at night in the mountains. This even gave rise to a saying, "Forest priests." Forced Islamization led to waves of self-immolation. Many Bulgarians preferred death over renouncing their Christian faith. Everything the Ottoman Turks did at the time can be called a genocide of Slavic culture. But the people did not give up. Many were forced to live double lives. Some even pretended to convert to Islam, but in secret they baptized their children and celebrated all Christian holidays. Women taught their children Bulgarian history and Christian prayers. In many homes, there were even 2 sets of dishes, one for the Turks and another, the clean one, for themselves. Secret schools began to appear in Bulgaria. Children were taught Old Church Slavonic literacy. Textbooks were hidden in double-bottomed chests or buried in gardens. The official language was Greek, and Ottoman courts conducted all legal matters in Greek. But Bulgarians stubbornly spoke their native Slavic language and preserved it for future generations for nearly 500 years. In the 16th century, even in the height of Ottoman rule, the first printed books in Bulgarian began to appear. Time passed. Just as every empire experiences its rise, it must eventually face its decline. By the 19th century, it was finally the Ottoman Empire's turn. With every passing decade, it grew weaker, and at the same time, national liberation movements in Bulgaria grew stronger. The culmination came with the April Uprising of 1876. However, the Turks brutally crushed the rebellion. The poorly armed Bulgarian insurgents were defeated. In southern Bulgaria alone, over 30,000 people were killed, including the elderly, women and children. Around 80 villages were burned and more than 200 were destroyed and looted. Despite the defeat, the April Uprising shook the Ottoman feudal rule in Bulgaria, and the brutal suppression of the uprising drew the attention of the great powers, especially Great Britain and the Russian Empire. These events on the Balkans became one of the main causes of the next Russo-Turkish War, as a result of which, just 2 years after the April Uprising, Bulgaria was liberated from Ottoman rule. From that moment, the history of modern Bulgaria begins, leading to the creation of the Tsardom of Bulgaria at the start of the 20th century. After that, Bulgaria took part in the Balkan Wars, trying to regain the territories it had controlled during the Middle Ages. At the start of World War I, Bulgaria declared neutrality. However, in 1915, the Tsardom of Bulgaria, following the pro-German orientation of its Tsar Ferdinand and hoping to annex all of Macedonia, entered the war on the side of Germany, Austro-Hungary and Turkey, who promised Bulgaria new territories in case of victory. Because of this, the countries of the Entente began to consider Bulgaria a traitor to the Slavic world, since it ended up fighting against Serbia and the Russian Empire. As a result of World War I, which ended in defeat for the Central Powers, Bulgaria was forced to cede part of its territories, including its Aegean Sea coastline. However, 20 years later, when Bulgaria joined Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany during World War II, it briefly regained some of its lost territories, including access to the Aegean Sea. But as you might have guessed, just like in World War I, Bulgaria chose the wrong allies. Germany was defeated and Bulgaria fell under the influence of the Soviet Union, one of the worst victors. This meant that Bulgaria lost its independence in both domestic and foreign policy. Thus came the collapse of the Tsardom of Bulgaria. After 45 years, by the end of the 20th century, Bulgaria peacefully, without major upheavals, moved away from communist dictatorship along with other socialist countries and began a series of economic reforms. And here we have to ask the question: why has a country with such a rich history and culture failed to achieve strong development, unlike, for example, Poland, which we talked about in a recent video? In the year 2000, Poland was poorer than Bulgaria. Back then, Poland's GDP per capita was 20% lower than Bulgaria's. But today, Poland is twice as rich. Why did this happen? What did Bulgaria do wrong? Formally, they did almost the same things. First came privatization, then the difficult 1990s with huge inflation, and later joining the European Union. Bulgaria has been an EU member for 18 years. But still, why does Bulgaria remain the poorest country in the entire European Union? Most researchers believe that Bulgaria only imitated reforms, while corruption schemes continue to evolve and become more sophisticated over the years. Privatization was carried out dishonestly, and most of the country's enterprises ended up in the hands of former party officials. All of this led to a massive population outflow and caused a real demographic catastrophe in Bulgaria. In just 35 years, the country's population fell from 9 million to 6.5 million. Oligarchs still control parts of the media and the judicial system. The political system remains unstable. From 2021 to 2024 alone, Bulgaria went through 5 different governments, and in the past 30 years, the government has changed 20 times. Is Bulgaria, the cradle of Slavic civilization, doomed? We don't know for sure, but recently there have been positive signs that give hope for Bulgaria's future. In recent years, protests against corruption have become more frequent, showing us that society is demanding change. The authorities have launched a judicial reform. In 2023, for the first time in 30 years, the country's natural population decline began to slow down. More than 200,000 Bulgarians have returned home over the past 3 years. The country is also seeing rise in wages and unemployment dropping to its lowest level in 20 years. The government is investing more in infrastructure projects. The economy is growing by about 4.5% per year, which is higher than the EU average. All of this gives hope that Bulgaria may finally break free from the trap of poverty and regain the place on the historical map that it rightfully deserves because of its rich and diverse history. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about this? Maybe you live in Bulgaria and have something to share. Or maybe you're thinking about moving to Bulgaria. And if you assume that Bulgaria has left its difficult period behind and it's entering an era of rapid development, now might be the perfect time to consider moving there. In any case, we can already see a growing influx of tourists coming to Bulgaria. The warm sea, beautiful nature, mountains, forests and wineries, all of this makes spending time in Bulgaria a very pleasant experience. And on this positive note, it's time to say goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you like to support us, you can become a sponsor. All the links are in the description. Thank you and see you in the next video.